And we're live. All right. So my name is Miriam, Miriam Walden, and my role in the union is that I'm the co-political director, which just means like a kind of unpaid volunteer dog's body. But I also teach at the high school. I teach history at the high school. And the purpose of this conversation is to get to know you as a candidate for the Albany Board of Trustees. So Brian, why don't you introduce yourself?
Right. So I'm Brian Beall. I grew up locally in Richmond. I went to high school. I got a bachelor's degree in mathematics from UC Berkeley. I work in information technology. I have a daughter who's 20. She's enrolled in a university now. And so what's attracted me to this situation is that it's the issue of COVID-19 that I think the school district and people, parents and teachers and so forth need a lot of help right now. So I'm hoping that my skills in emergency management, in computer technology, and also in the political process can help with this. So my priorities are first to address the immediate situation, safe reopening of schools. The next, but parallel, is addressing the impact to the most impacted people, such as the disabled community, the African-American community, and so forth. And then finally is to moving forward to address the equity issues, specifically around technology.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. So tell us how you've been involved in the schools. What are your connections with Albany Public Schools?
Right. And so I came here in 2006, just like just about everyone in Albany. I came here because of the school. There's a legacy of education in my family, but also in the Yang side of my family. My wife's family is also, it was very important. So we all came to agreement that Albany was the place to come. We bought the house here in 2006. And so my daughter spent most of her time here. She actually graduated from Berkeley. So she transferred the last year for different reasons. So that's the main connection to Albany schools, but also from the outside, I've worked a lot in the city, and also specifically around the soda tax and the use of its money towards drinking water refilling stations, and to use to fund the crossing guards that were lost, the funding that was lost due to, okay, sorry, cut me off.
No, not at all.
I give you
I'm
a
just
time
agreeing.
reason.
Yeah.
I'll go on
Okay.
and on forever about anything. So.
Thank you for thinking of the crossing guards. That's so important. Yeah. Cool. And so I don't know if in that time that your daughter was in the schools, you got a chance to spend some time in classrooms, or if you've spent time in classrooms elsewhere. Maybe
I did. I did, and the thing that really impresses me, I've spent some time in Albany classes and in the the general. Well, I've actually performed at Albany High, and just thinking of the environment there and the other schools I've been to. I've been to. I mentioned I graduated from John F. Kennedy High in Richmond, and I recently went there to speak at the Career Day. And I brought my yearbook with me, and the people were amazed at how much things had changed in the decades since I've been there. So I think Albany classrooms are seem much more sophisticated than others in terms of just the atmosphere. In terms of, is it a pleasant atmosphere to learn in? And I'm really looking forward to the construction that's happening. How particularly Albany Middle School, how some of the things are going on around energy. I think that's going to be a big focus of any new initiatives that comes from me. It'll be around energy and infrastructure and how they can help with our cost and finance situation.
You mentioned performing at Albany High. I have to follow up on that one.
Oh yeah, so actually, so I'll tell you, and since we're informal here, I have a very diverse background, and so one of the things that happened at an early age, at the age of 10, I started studying Chinese culture. I took ancient Chinese art at Berkeley, and I married a woman from China. So what happened was, now my daughter became involved with the Chinese dance group, A La Dance, which sort of started here in Berkeley. She left the group about when she was about 12. It's a group that was mainly of children and Chinese women. It turns out a lot of the Chinese women and some other people too, but have American husbands or Caucasian husbands. So at some point, she decided to recruit the husbands. So the last performance at A La Dance was a fun one because we wore the same costumes and did the same act that the wives had done the year before. So, so at some point, I'll, you know, those pictures are floating around somewhere. So that was all on dance, and I'm involved with some other ethnic dance too. But the point here, though, is that I think understanding ethnic culture of the different ethnic groups is very important to the work that we're doing in terms of racism and stuff. That I feel like, you know, a lot of white or a lot of different groups don't understand the other groups because they don't know the whole history. They don't like, will treat what a lot of white people think, well, if we treat a black person just like a white person, then we're not being racist. That's not always true, because you have to take into account, you know, what the background is. So so I've recently, that's been part of my kind of rounding out my experiences, to understand different people and to understand also nonverbal communication. That and these are some things that I think are important for children to learn to be successful in their lives.
What did you feel like the experience of studying at Albany did for your daughter? Did you want to comment on any of that?
Well, yes, sure. And also just about how I feel as a parent too, because you know, I went to Kennedy, and that was back in the 70s and the end of the 80s, and you know, and my mom did the best she could for me, but I just feel like I've been able to provide so much more for my daughter, for her to be able to go to school here. I think there is some misgivings at the end that sort of has to do with the Instagram incident, though she's half Caucasian and half Chinese, so she gets a little bit of the anti-Asian you know, the racism, but not as much. So I think it was more about you know, and I hear from my family that these two schools are closely tied, Berkeley and Albany, and the community got a history. So it's not surprising. But what I tend to hear is that Albany High, or I'm sorry, Berkeley High, is the better of the two for some students because of the diversity of the program. So that's kind of the one. I think she really enjoyed the arts programs there, the play. I remember very fondly, and so
cool. Yeah, I think that it has been a nice thing that we've been able to have a back and forth flow between Albany and Berkeley, and not you know, not overly restrict the ability of students to transfer between communities. That when we do that, it allows folks to choose and make decisions about what they need, and it also enriches whichever program is the receiving, you know, program, that we get to meet people from other places. So it's not like Berkeley's so far away, but it's good to have that community bond that's created by being able to go to school together. I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
Well, not really. This is, as you mentioned, it's an informal discussion. So I guess I'll just kind of go with this. And I think, and Chinese have this saying, guanxi. I don't know how to pronounce it, but for relationship, the importance of relationship. So I think relationships with other school districts are very important. And if we're talking about equity, and we're talking about racism, restricting the discussion to inside Albany has some inherent problems with it,
Sure.
because it sort of is a racist border. It's people that, you know, you have to earn so much money in order to live here. And
Absolutely.
so the taxpayers in Albany have already agreed to extend the enrollment to accept inter-district transfers. And I don't think now would be the best time to ask them for more. But at this time, with COVID-19 and with the transition to the virtual classroom, it looks to me like an opportunity to get involved with some of the other school districts. Particular Oakland School District is suffering very hard right now. How maybe there's a way we can share some of our expertise. You know, if we can't import students, maybe we can export Albany expertise. And you know, that's kind of my thoughts on the subject.
Okay. Yeah, that's really interesting thinking. Let's maybe switch gears. Well, no, let me try to put a cap on all that. Your experience in the classroom, your experience with your daughter, your experience of your own education, and the work that you've done in the city and the work that you've done in the schools. How does that lead you to a vision for what public education is? And what's the point? I'm doing all these things for my students. We're all working, trying hard to make this whole thing work. What exactly is our mission in your eyes?
And I really think it's to provide a quality education for everyone, for the entire community. In terms of the Albany Unified School District, it's not just about education. It's also about the people that work for the school district, about the teachers, about the maintenance employees, and it's about the community. But what I would have to say is how education fits into the overall concept of social and economic justice is that the education creates a division in society, that that people that don't have access to quality education are doomed, or they're limited. It's like a glass ceiling, if you would, is how far they're going to be able to go in life, and that's just not fair. It's everyone should have access to equal education. So and I think the acute case of right now is we have a responsibility to the disabled community, and that's probably the most challenging thing, because we have a legal obligation to as long as it's feasible, as far as feasible, to provide that same quality education. So I think in terms of the vision, I think it would be great to have a community college in Albany. Because I feel like, as much as I like the interconnectedness that we talk about, I also think we should be self-sufficient. And that we should look to financially self-sufficient as well.
My friends from Europe talk about community college as the ultimate expression of the public mission of education in the United States, because in Europe it's you have to test into college, and college is for the few, and they look at the presence of community college in the United States and say, well, see, that proves that you guys are really into public education. This equal access for all being applied to college sort of blows their mind. So,
and on that note, Miriam, you know, when I was looking through the CSBA publications, I read about a Longview example where they're working, and here in Albany, I know we work with the city and with the University of California, Berkeley. But this was like it also included community college, and I don't know what degree we're doing that there, but it does have to be part of the vision, because yes, not everyone in Albany is going to be able to go to a four-year university.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And in fact, so just so I can plug my own school, we actually do have quite an intense relationship with Laney College, and we've done things here at Albany High where we offer community college classes on the Albany High campus, and also what they call linked learning that allows students to get co-credit at high school and in college. So we're working it, but there's so much more that could be done, and that's a really brilliant.
You mentioned a name that's dear to my heart, and that's Laney College. I actually took 2 classes there in COBOL, because this is a programming language that wasn't offered at Berkeley, and that was how my first job was, from what I learned at Laney College.
All right. Yeah, yes, that important technical education that really makes everything work. So tell me a little bit on a different note about your experience with the unions, since this is a union
Yes.
publication that we're watching right here. What have you experienced in terms of unions in your life?
Yeah. So actually, so I'm involved with the Democratic Party, which has a close relationship with the unions, and I've sort of met a lot of people from unions, different leaders. I think it was about 2 years ago, I went to a Union Labor Party event in San Francisco that featured Barbara Boxer was the keynote speaker, and she talked about it. And I think what really impressed me, that Barbara talked about a deal she'd made relating to interstate commerce, in how and having to there were people that wanted to take away the truck driver's ability to stop and go to the bathroom, something along those lines. So it's just like, look, this is about basic respect, that a blue collar worker should get the same respect that a white collar worker. I remember when I was in high school, I worked on the City of Richmond gardening crew, and kind of nosebleed. The manager wanted to take us all to the hospital, had us sitting there all day. And I said, well, isn't this kind of a waste of the city's money? And he said, well, people in the office, they're in the air conditioning all day, So I guess what I'm saying is, it's about respect. It's about giving workers the respect, and it's about giving them what they need, giving teachers what they need in order to be a part of this community. The same stress, basically the housing cost. The housing cost alone here it's stressing everyone out. It's stressing out the parents, it's stressing out the teachers. And I think, what we can do is look for ways to maybe convert school assets in some way, that we can provide housing and energy and things like that.
Yeah, there are plans for that go way back to the time when I was on the school board. You could look them up. We had ideas. It's never happened, but it's a really interesting idea. Yeah, so I think that what happens in any school board election I've experienced is that all the candidates say that they want to support teachers. And you've already started to elaborate on that, but what I'd love to do is kind of get beyond what the broad idea of support, and just like, how exactly does that look? And of course, you can't imagine every issue that will come up, and we don't want you to either, but how exactly would it work to approach things from the point of view of supporting teachers?
Yeah, well, first of all, let me just kind of back up to my overall philosophy about government and problem solving. There's a principle in American government, which is government by the consent of the governed. So I'm not going to be coming in as this expert from afar that's going to tell people what to do. I'm going to listen to what people have to say, particularly the teachers, the students, the different groups, and look for solutions that work for everyone, that are agreeable to everyone. And it's more of a negotiation process. In terms of specifically what I think is missing, for what we need to get teachers what they need in order to do their job, instead of blaming them for all the problems. So I think number one, teachers need to have the right technology. They need to have adequate funding. We've tended to shift the blame for that on the state and the federal level, but I see where we can do something about that is through the energy programs, and also about the housing. So there's got to be a way we can get some sort of way to help teachers with housing, whether it be with teacher housing. I don't think you'd necessarily want to live on campus, but maybe some sort of voucher or something. But we really have to help in those areas.
Maybe you could explain more what you mean about the energy. You're talking about like
Oh
reducing
yeah,
the
right.
cost of energy at the schools, or
No,
usage, or
this is the thing, right? So the school district and the city both have some of the same goals, right? We want to address equity, we want to help with the economy, and we want to meet our carbon goals. So my idea is that through some financial vehicle, I need to research the details. I know some school districts are doing this, but through some financial vehicle, we finance the acquisition of solar panels. We can create local jobs, we could create training programs for the youth, and we can buy that asset, and that becomes a community-owned asset that once it's paid off, the energy, we don't have to pay the BG&E bill. And then it helps us to meet our carbon goals. So that's kind of my, yeah, it's not all detail yet. It's not all laid out. And I think a lot of it for me is going to be just getting us through this crisis. But in a way, we're going to need something. The other side of it is going to be I talked about the relationships. There's a lot of interesting things that happen with Albany in terms of the school budget, particularly related to the UC Village. We pointed that out earlier about the crossing guards, that they're exempt from paying property taxes. My understanding is that Peggy Thompson in her time made some kind of negotiation with the state to compensate for us somehow. And so I think there's more along those lines. We need to work more closely to try to find money. Even if they don't have it, we've got to ask, right? And get creative, maybe have some really good yard sales. But I don't know, with this Buy Nothing Albany, right? Really gonna put the yard sale business on a flag. I don't know. The thrift store is really going to be complaining about this.
No, that's some good ideas. Thank you for sharing. There's a long history of the relationship between the village and the city, and the relationship between the village and the schools. And something people often don't realize is that every child that comes to Albany schools brings $9,500 with them from the state, and so it doesn't actually matter whether they live on property that's taxed or not. That's huge. And then back in the day, the University Village used to pay towards our preschool that we have, our public preschool that we have in Albany, and I think that has dropped off. That used to be one of the little ways that they would kind of pitch back in. So there's definitely a history of that, and that could be renewed. That's really interesting.
Be clear. I want to be clear. There's definitely a benefit to having the village here, particularly because of the diversity. I heard a comment from one former Albany teacher that it's the diversity that comes from the village. It comes from the university is what makes us such a good school district.
Yeah, last time we measured it, there were 50 different languages spoken at Albany High. So that's beyond what most people even really are thinking about when they say diversity. Yeah. So you mentioned COVID a couple of times. What do you think I think it's not possible for any of us to imagine exactly what's supposed to happen here because there's so many things in flux, but maybe it's possible for us to sort of line out what are the things we need to be considering as we try to evolve our response and work back towards a more ideal way of doing education. What are the things you would be looking at to make those decisions?
Well, I think the most important thing is if we're talking about physical reopening, that the procedures have to be in place. You have to have what is the policy on masks? What is the screening? Are we taking people's temperatures? What is the distancing in the classroom? So those are some of the things in terms of the physical arrangement. Before that, we need to have this technology thing, but we need to make sure we're not choosing physical reopening over distance learning because of a technology issue. It needs to be because it's safe and appropriate to do so. That said, I think those are some of the things. Contact tracing. I'm not sure how that would work in the school district, but obviously you've got to have that. And then there's a lot of teacher support. We've got to do a lot to support the teachers in terms of the training. which I'm sure you've probably already had a lot of that, but as the day comes closer, there's going to be a lot of communication. Yeah.
Yeah. I think one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot is that the way in which times of big change like this, sometimes what happens is we get sort of nostalgic. So we're all like trying to recreate what we had before. You know, we're trying to recreate in remote learning what we had before. We're trying to recreate when we come back what we had before. And maybe this is an opportunity for us to let go. You know, the original design of high schools, for example, was for like an industrial society, teach people to leave at the bells and sort of, you know, move around like they're in a factory. And I wonder if this is a moment when we could also be liberating ourselves from some of the constraints of what was before.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. We're not going to return to what we returned to before. Whatever happens, there's no way to go back. And so I see the change to a virtual classroom. I'd like to see some elements of it persist, and that this is a way we could have more collaborative arrangements that sort of transcend the geographical relationship. You know, up until now, the physical classroom was a constraint on our ability to address equity because it was rooted in the redlining past, where you know we have the rich school districts and the poor school districts, and not as much funding coming from the state and federal government. So with the virtual learning, we could have virtual learning communities where you know, where Albany students could interact with students from other school districts, and you know, we have exchange of ideas in learning.
Yeah. I was thinking of returning to something you said earlier about about the consent of the governed, which is a really interesting idea. Of course, I'm a social studies teacher, so naturally that caught my ear. But sometimes I think people think that what the union wants in a candidate for school board is someone who will do X, Y, and Z for us. You know, like we want someone who will commit to wage increases, or we want someone who will commit to something specific. And I've been working in this union and other unions for going on 30 years now, and it's never been my experience that that's actually what people want. It's that idea of participation in the decision-making process. We wish for someone who calls us first, you know, before they make a decision, who says, wait a minute, I wonder how this is going to affect the janitors, you know, even if they can't imagine an impact. And well, should we call them up and ask them? You know, we want someone who is thinking about the issues as something that we all have to move together. And so you just cannot impose things on folks because they all have to participate in making it happen. So better to build it together, and then we'll all be able to move it forward together. So I don't know if you wanted to elaborate on that.
Yeah, I will. Thank you very much, Miriam. In fact, you know, one of the people who's endorsed me is Council Member Michael Barnes. He made the comment that I'm an ethical person who represents the whole community. But also in my philosophical background, I truly believe that what's in the interest of all humanity is that there's no conflict between these two things. You know, if you're saying, well, what the school union needs and what the overall community needs, it's not very likely that there's going to be a conflict between those two things. But I think it's very important that every group be heard. And so, and kind of coming back to what you said, we like somebody to call us first. Everybody likes that. So I think what I'm building through this process, of declaring myself as a candidate, I'm finding it's really changing my relationship with the community and my knowledge of these issues. Some of these, my positions are changing since I've been involved in this, because I'm delving into so much detail. I'm really beginning to understand the inequity issue in property taxes, how a new homeowner in Albany, if they're paying $1 million, that's going to be $2,000 a month just in property taxes, and it's really putting stress. The high cost of housing is putting a lot of stress on Albany families, and that has an impact. I got away from the topic here, but
That's okay.
that's the idea of, like, I think the disabled community is a key element of this. I think the African American community, the other ethnic, the Hispanic community is a very important element. I think teachers, I think the other workers at the school. But what it all comes down to, I think, is that the teachers probably know best about what is missing on the ground. I had the privilege, rare privilege, through my last company. I sat at a meeting with next to the former president of Starbucks. He made this. He had this, as he said in his book. He said, the person who sweeps the floor should get to choose the broom. And so, and I'm not saying that teachers, janitors, or custodians, but you should be the ones. You should be the ones that decide what tools and what technology are right for the classroom. It shouldn't be some lobbyist in Washington that decided that his company was going to make more money if you bought his product. So I think teachers have to be forefront in the discussions that happen.
It's not on our list, but something that has come up in questions that my union colleagues have asked, and I'll just invite there's anyone who wants to add in a question to go ahead and do that. But something else that has come up from my union colleagues is a question about the way board meetings work. And one thing in particular is that those of us who attend board meetings and follow the school board's conversations are often up until midnight or later trying to find out what is going on. And then we get up, and I don't know if you know what a teacher's life is, but most of us are up by 6 and have to be, performing at our best by 8. So that's really tricky. So my colleagues want to ask, like, what can we do about that? But I think it's actually really a broader question of what do you think? How can we have a school board that conducts its business in a way that is commensurate with the community's expectations? And what have you noticed? What would you?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought this one up, because I really did. As I was getting into it, I said, why are both the incumbents not filing for re-election? I never got I don't know directly, but I've kind of started looking into it. Why is it so hard? When I looked at those meetings, and so I think decorum is very important. I am noticing it's different between the city meetings and the school board meetings. I thought it was a little bit looser. But specifically, yeah, it looks like there's got to be a way to break this up so that when we come to the actual school board meeting, the decision can be made in a reasonable amount of time. Zoom has created this phenomena. Sorry, I shouldn't blame it on Zoom, because there are other services. And Zoom didn't create the problem. They solved that. But it is having this impact that the number of people coming to meetings is an order of magnitude higher, right? Whereas it might have been 50 people before, it's 500 now. So how are you going to have all those people? Well, I think, and I at one meeting I saw Superintendent Wells brought this concept up of a group speaking. In the group being limited to 5 minutes. I think if groups would go along with that might be a good way, because oftentimes you do have simply 100 people saying the same thing over and over and over again. And if we could satisfactorily maybe have a group that has a leader that gives the main points, and that maybe there's a second person that gives a second angle, and then a few other people, and they all stand together so we know how many people. But there has to be accountability to time as well. Right. But you have to be careful, though. You've got to give people their constitutional right to be heard.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting idea, because it also part of the I think part of what a school board meeting means to me as an organizer is it's an opportunity for the community to have a conversation with itself. And so one of the weaknesses of the Zoom meeting environment is that we aren't able to listen to each other and kind of caucus the same way that we might in a physical room. And but why not just recreate that? Like let people kind of work things out and speak in a more united way directly in the meeting. It's an interesting idea. I like it.
Yeah, but again, you've got the Brown Act. So
Right.
the Brown
Absolutely.
Act's good and bad because it means, that we want to avoid going off and making a decision somewhere in private. So yeah.
Balancing acts. That's the whole story, isn't it? Is there something that I didn't ask you that you wish you had said that you'd like to elaborate on before we close?
I think I'll probably want to tell you a little bit about my family background. And how much time do we have left, Miriam?
About somewhere between 3 and 7 minutes we can take.
Oh,
Yeah.
3 and 7 minutes. Okay, so maybe I could give you a little spiel and we could have some more time for questions.
Sure.
And I'll focus more on stuff that people would tend to not know about me. And that's, so my parents met in the Bay Area in Berkeley, and we have a history in the area. My great grandparents moved to Point Richmond in 1906. My dad was a university professor at Maryland. I lived there for my first 14 years, not here. So that's the first thing that kind of throws people like, did you grow up in Albany? No, I didn't. I was back east before then. And there were a number of things that I was able to take advantage of there. I got interested in mathematics at a very early age, and actually took calculus at the age of 12. I didn't actually get school credit for it till I was in high school. I also had an interesting program at Goddard Space Flight Center, where I studied seismology a little bit. So then another thing that happened that what I remember most from my elementary school years was my vice principal. And the vice principal, Mr. Kerensky, I don't know what happened, but one day I got in trouble at school. He called me into his office and he looked at me and he said, someday, Brian, you could be Attorney General of the United States. And I didn't know, this was third grade. I didn't know what that was, but those words stuck with me. And so, more so than anything else from elementary school on. So the point there was that I think school children need someone to believe in them. And that was what carried me forward. And I learned the value of mathematics was, it wasn't always so much that I used it for things, but that it was a door opener, that it impressed people that I was able to handle mathematics because so many people have difficulty with it. And what I have heard is that it's like a foreign language in the sense that that part of your brain sort of loses its abilities after you get older, after you cross into the college years. So it actually was easier for me to learn then. So I came here to Richmond, and I was early age. I was monitoring the air quality. I was involved with, my mother was involved with Save the Bay. So I was involved. We lived over there. The oil refinery was kind of a problem at the time. So I would call the air quality management district. So then I went to Berkeley and met a lot of different people. And I've been around in the Bay Area, but the interesting thing is I really never knew Albany was here. I really didn't know much about it because it's so small. We came here to play video games at Albany and Beall. And so I married a woman from China, Lisa Yang, in 1999. And as the story, I was living in Concord at the time. And so as the story goes, we stood here in front of the house in 2006, and she looked at me and said, buy Albany house for baby. And so I decided it would be better to do that. So, and I'm just kind of giving the chronology. So then, but in order to make the house payments were pretty brutal. Fortunately, I was coming out of an economic downturn for myself. which kind of had started around 2001. I was gradually climbing my way out. I had run my own business doing computer service and repair, teaching people how to use computers and how to deal with them. And an old manager called me up, and I went to work for the startup company in Silicon Valley. That did mean I was away from the home more, and I was less involved until 2012. And I got the job locally. So one day walking up Solano Avenue, we see this sign. I see a sign that says "Free Block Party." Well, I like things that are free. So I signed up to be the block party. We've been talking about it on our block for a while. And so I got involved with that. And then I got on one list after the other. I got recruited for the CERT program. And then I took the Albany Citizens Academy. I served on the Social and Economic Justice Commission. There I helped with the soda tax and the sidewalk tax. So I've had experience speaking at city council meetings and trying to convince the city council members to vote in a certain way. And then going forward, I think I see this as a good opportunity. This is probably the biggest case where I can do the most for the most people, because the education community in Albany is most impacted by COVID-19. I think I'll go to a Q&A now because I'm out of breath.
Well, I think that folks are dropping in and off to go to dinner, so we may have lost our random questions. And I really appreciate this conversation. We wanted to make sure that people could find you to find out more. And so I have this low-tech idea. So here goes. Yeah. That folks can go to the union website, and we have loaded up there a link directly to Brian's information so that you can go right on into Brian's website. And I know that he would appreciate your volunteerism, your funding, your endorsement, and whatever else you see is appropriate after you've looked at the issues. And something else is that we'll be releasing these videos and promoting them on our Twitter feed. And so you can always follow us on Twitter and you'll get ongoing information from the union. But mostly we just, it's a pleasure for us to be involved in this process because more than anything, we believe in civic engagement and making, we see teaching as an inherently political act, and public education is a political endeavor, and for all of our students and their families to be involved, that's what's really important. And yes, so Brian has also put his website into the chat, and hopefully people will see that there or follow the link through our website. And just keep the conversation going, because however this works out,
I would just say, we're late. I was very late getting started in this campaign, late pulling papers. It just kind of happened at the last minute. But we do have this Nation Builder site set up. I'm mainly right now just looking for small donations and small shows of support from a larger group of people. I kind of want to avoid this situation where I've got this big chunk of money. I don't think there's going to be a lot spent on this campaign. We came up with a number of $5,000 or something based on past school board races, and I don't know. I mean, it might be less this year because it's hard to do anything.
Yeah.
No one can go anywhere.
Right.
So I think that's about the gist of it. And I'm really looking forward at this point to listening to people's ideas and getting back to what you said about consent of the governed. I want to really understand what people want. And that's going to come through hearing from a larger number of people.
Cool. Well, hopefully we can pull people in with this and keep the conversation going. Thank you so much. I'm going to end the recording. And